A word of caution. This episode features descriptions of crimes and sexual assaults against children. Please take care when listening. It's August, and many people I know are sending their students back to the classroom. Both of my kids started their college classes this week, and those in the Charlotte area public schools are counting down the days until K through 12 students re-enter the classroom. It made me think of the various cases I've shared over the years in this podcast, stories of children who went missing while either on their way to school or, in one case from North Carolina, during school recess. It's a parent's worst nightmare. I've pulled some of these stories, solved and unsolved, from our catalog, along with some schools in North and South Carolina that are rumored to be haunted by spirits of students and faculty for this student-centered episode. There is much to love about North and South Carolina, but the two states have also had their fair share of violent and senseless crimes over the years, from murders on the Blue Ridge Parkway, in the heart of big cities or sleepy college towns, and along the coastal waters. Some of these stories may be new to you. Some may have happened in your town. Some may involve people that are still missing to this day. But all will leave you remembering to always be vigilant about the people you meet and the places you go. I'm Renee Robertson. Please join me for Missing in the Carolinas. Episode 151, Missing and Murdered Students and Spirits in Carolina Schools. I want to start out today's episode with a very old case that occurred in the early 1900s. I first shared the story of 8-year-old Kenneth Beasley in episode 42, Missing, Murdered, and Mistaken Identity in the Carolinas. On February 13, 1905, 8-year-old Kenneth Beasley left his home in rural Currituck County, which was about 50 miles from Norfolk, Virginia, and 30 miles from Elizabeth City, to walk to school, which was about a half mile from his home. His school was located in Odd Fellows Hall, which has since been turned into a private residence, just 1 block away from the Poplar Branch post office. Kenneth was a middle child who had a 17-year-old brother and 4-year-old sister, so they weren't on the walk with him that morning. Kenneth's father was Samuel Beasley, a farmer who had opened the Poplar Branch boat landing for commercial fishing and transport a few years earlier. Samuel was also the state senator for Currituck County at the time and was away in the state capital of Raleigh. It was cold and snowy on that morning, but by recess, the students were able to get outside for some fresh air. Kenneth's 2 teachers were Nina Harrison, who taught the 4 lower grades, and Professor M.P. Jennings, who taught the older students and served as the head of the school. Kenneth played with his friends during recess, but when the bell rang to go back into school around 1 p.m., Kenneth told his cousin Benny Walker, "I'm going farther back." He then disappeared into the dense woods behind the school. Later, Kenneth's classmates said they didn't know why he wanted to go into the woods. He must not have planned to be gone long, because he left his coat and gloves hanging inside the school building. When his teacher discovered he hadn't returned from recess, she alerted the headmaster and they sent a few students out to search for the boy. Once the townspeople caught wind of what was going on, they organized a more extensive search. Even with 300 men searching the woods and wetlands in Currituck County, no sign of Kenneth turned up. They checked a cabin in the woods where a man described as a Yankee was known to live to see if he'd seen or heard anything, but the man had abandoned the cabin long before Kenneth's disappearance. Senator Beasley arranged to take the train back home as soon as he received a telegram with the news. Rumors began to circulate, and keep in mind that this was during the era where yellow journalism frequented the newspapers. Editors were known to print rumors and opinions as quickly as they would confirmed facts. In her book, True Crime Stories of Eastern North Carolina, author Kathy Pickens pointed out this account that the Raleigh News and Observer printed. There was a strange man up about Barco Post Office in 2 more places by 3 different men. He was in a buggy drawn by a black male and had the boy down between his knees, but the people saw him before they heard that the boy was missing. These men that saw him say that the boy was crying and seemed dissatisfied, but the man was talking to him rough. Almost from the beginning, the residents of Poplar Branch had one main suspect in mind as they considered whether Kenneth Beasley had been kidnapped. Joshua Harrison was a farmer who had married into an influential family. His father-in-law was a Methodist minister. His brother-in-law was a U.S. congressman who had helped create what is now East Carolina University. Joshua Harrison, who was also the father of Kenneth's teacher Nina Harrison, had a reputation for being a bully in the community, as well as a bootlegger. In the past, he had been charged with shooting a man named Caleb Owens in the forehead, killing him instantly. He claimed the gun had gone off accidentally and wasn't charged for the crime. Author Kathy Pickens found in her research that Caleb Owens appeared to be a young boy around the age of 8. Harrison was also charged with killing an elderly man in another case, but he was found not guilty. It's unclear why he evaded prosecution in these crimes. Was it his wealthy family's influence? His reputation as a violent man who made his own wine? No one really knows. But in the early 1900s, Samuel Beasley was creating legislation that would prohibit the sale of liquor. Joshua Harrison took this personally, as his business was affected. The friction between the two men led residents to suspect Joshua Harrison had kidnapped young Kenneth Beasley in retaliation. An April 5, 1905 article that ran in the Charlotte Daily Observer printed an inflammatory article that only further convinced the public of Joshua Harrison's involvement. It read, "The peculiar and baffling mystery connected with the disappearance of Kenneth Beasley, the 8-year-old son of State Senator S.M. Beasley of Poplar Branch, Currituck County, has been cleared up by finding of the boy in Norfolk, where he was carried by those who kidnapped him during the recess of the Poplar Branch High School on Monday, February 13th. It is reported that one of the kidnappers has been arrested and fear is entertained for his safety. Senator Beasley and Detective Hurricane Branch have gone to Norfolk to bring the missing boy back home. It is alleged that the boy was spirited away from the school in a vehicle and that one of the kidnappers is the son of a prominent preacher. Mr. Beasley, shortly after his son's disappearance, offered a $500 reward for his recovery. Just a day later, the newspaper had to retract the article, as the Norfolk police in Virginia had no information regarding the location of Kenneth Beasley or any kidnappers. Yellow journalism had struck once again. 18 months after Kenneth Beasley's disappearance, Joshua Harrison was indicted for the crime. While the case was tried in Elizabeth City, many Currituck County residents made the trip to the courthouse for the trial. Several witnesses described having seen Harrison's horse and buggy on the day Kenneth went missing, and they said there was a young boy matching Kenneth's physical description with him. Another witness testified that Joshua Harrison spoke about Kenneth's disappearance whenever they would get together. However, it doesn't appear the prosecutors had any physical evidence against Harrison. Despite this, he was found guilty. As he was led from the courtroom, he swore his innocence and said he had no idea what happened to Kenneth Beasley. Joshua Harrison was released from jail on appeal to no avail. He was ordered to prison, but shot himself in his hotel room in the Norfolk Hotel before he could be transported. He left behind a written statement, once again emphasizing his innocence. In 2018, a North Carolina attorney named Charles Oldham researched the case extensively and published a book titled The Senator's Son: The Shocking Disappearance, the Celebrated Trial, and the Mystery That Remains a Century Later. In it, he explores the rumors about the case as well as the reporting and political climate of the time. He also says he has a theory about what really happened to Kenneth Beasley. I haven't read the book, but plan to add it to my reading list and will link it in the show notes for anyone else who is interested. The disappearance of Kenneth Beasley remains one of North Carolina's most enduring mysteries. Next, I'd like to talk about the murders of 2 young girls in the Chapel Hill area that occurred more than 40 years ago. I first discussed them on episode 97, Chapel Hill Carborough Crimes from the 1980s. On February 22, 1984, 7-year-old Carrie Wilkerson failed to report to school at Frank Porter Graham Elementary in Carborough. That morning, firefighters investigating a fire at the Rocky Brook Trailer Park off South Greensboro Street discovered the body of Carrie in the bedroom closet of her stepmother Norma Shivers's home. Carrie was the birth daughter of Shivers's first husband, and she had stayed with her stepmother after the two divorced. The little girl had been sexually assaulted and strangled before a fire was started and damaged part of the trailer. It appeared a kerosene heater with some clothes laid on top of it had ignited and started the fire. Shivers told the police that she normally left for work around 7:30 a.m., and Carrie would get herself ready for school and walk with two other girls from their neighborhood. But the girls said when they knocked on the door for Carrie that morning, she told them she was with a friend and would come to school later. When they asked who the friend was, she said it was none of their business. Norma Shivers said around the same time firefighters were discovering the fire at the mobile home, a man called North Carolina Memorial Hospital, where she worked, and asked the nurse who answered the phone to tell Norma he'd killed Carrie and that he was sorry. Earlier that morning, another call had come into the OR asking for Norma, but she said when she answered the line, the caller hung up. She said she suspected the caller had been a man named George Fisher, the husband of a coworker and a friend at the hospital, because he was the only person she knew who had both of those telephone numbers. Unfortunately, there was more than one suspicious person lurking in Carrie Wilkerson's life. Shivers' own brother, a man named Eddie Hathaway, had admitted to molesting Carrie a few weeks earlier. He was a prime suspect in the eyes of the police. In April of 1984, Edith Page, Carrie's maternal grandmother, offered a $5,000 reward for information leading to a conviction in the death of her granddaughter. The office of Governor James B. Hunt Jr. was also offering a $5,000 reward, along with one for $100,000 to $10,000 from an arson awareness committee in Raleigh. Edith Page told the local media that she could understand people not wanting to get involved, but she was hoping the reward would encourage someone to come forward. But without physical evidence tying any of the suspects to the crime, and no one coming forward with additional tips, the case went cold. A year later, another little girl lost her life in the early morning hours before school. That morning, on January 30th, 1985, a man walking his dog at the Mason Farm Biological Reserve in Chapel Hill, near the Findlay Golf Course, discovered the body of a young girl hanging from a tree, a rope coated in plastic wrapped around her neck in a slip knot. She was wearing green corduroy pants, pink jogging shoes, a light blue quilted jacket, and a blue shirt with the words "Do It Yourself" printed on it. Police soon learned 8-year-old Jean Carhar Fewel had been walking to Ephesus Road Elementary School with her 12-year-old brother before she failed to report to her classroom. She had moved to Chapel Hill from Hong Kong the year before and was in the process of being adopted by Thomas Fewel and Joy Wood. A former Sunday school teacher described Jean as a highly active, curious, happy child who loved to have her picture taken. At first, police announced they were unsure of whether the little girl's death was the result of a suicide or a homicide. After setting up a special hotline asking for tips on the case, the Chapel Hill Police Department received a number of calls. Witnesses told police they had seen Jean in the passenger seat of a car that was described as a mid-1970 four-door Plymouth Satellite with a tan or light-colored vinyl top. Other neighbors of Jean said they had seen that car driving around Jean's neighborhood the morning before she left school and speeding away from where Jean's body was found around 8:45. Police soon figured out George Richard Fisher, the family friend of Norma Shivers, drove a car matching that description. When shown a photo, two witnesses identified Fisher, who was wearing a distinctive pair of black framed glasses, as the man who was with Jean before her body was discovered. In fact, local residents said he was often seen around the school, even though he had no business being near the grounds. He was arrested on February 4th, 1985, and charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and rape in the death of Jean Fewel. Hair and fabric similar to the clothing Jean was wearing the day she was murdered were found in a search of Fisher's car. When he went on trial in August 1985, his attorney argued that evidence presented in the case showed the possibility that his client was involved in the case, but did not necessarily prove his guilt. Fisher testified on his own behalf, and he presented a long, rambling timeline of his actions on the morning Jean was murdered that didn't necessarily paint him in a positive light. He said he left for work that morning around 6:15 a.m., but found his car was stuck in the mud. He realized he wasn't feeling well and feared he might have caught the flu from his wife, a registered nurse. But he went to pick up two of his coworkers who lived in a halfway house for recovering alcoholics near the University Mall. They never came out for their ride, though, even after he honked his horn in front of the halfway house. Fisher then went to a convenience store to buy gas, coffee, and a pastry. A clerk at that convenience store later testified Fisher had bought a coffee and a cinnamon twist pastry, an item of food that matched one that was found in Gene Fewel's lunchbox later that morning. After leaving the gas station, he claimed he went to an adult bookstore to see if any of his friends were there and watch pornographic movies. However, he couldn't provide the name of the adult bookstore. He stayed there for 2 hours, then went to the office of his employer to pick up a W-2 form. The bookkeeper confirmed he had been there around 10:30 a.m. to pick up the paperwork. He then went home and watched television until his wife returned from work. A fiber analyst with the State Bureau of Investigation said he performed tests that showed 18 positive connections involving fibers from Gene's clothes and Fisher's clothes in the car. An expert for the defense testified that the fibers found in the car that police believe belonged to Gene could have come from other sources. Fisher claimed he had often picked up hitchhikers in the car, so fibers could have been transferred from them. An expert for the prosecution testified that semen found on Gene's shirt could have come from Fisher, and 7 dark hairs found in his car could have belonged to Gene. As the Chapel Hill News pointed out, the murders of Carrie Wilkerson and Gene Fewel were very similar. Both of the victims were second graders in the community with dark brown hair. They were both murdered in the early morning hours before school. Both involved sexual assaults or attempts and strangulation. Fisher had served time in both an Ohio psychiatric hospital and North Carolina prison for arson convictions in both states. He had been on parole since 1982. On August 21, 1985, a jury found George Fisher guilty in the murder, attempted rape, and kidnapping in the death of Gene Fewel. He received a life sentence for first-degree murder, 40 years for kidnapping, and 20 years for attempted rape. He also received 22 years for violating his parole after being convicted in 1974 for arson, breaking and entering, and larceny in Onslow County. During the sentencing hearing, Gene's adoptive father, Tom Fewel, asked that Fisher's life be spared. He said, "I am opposed to capital punishment. I believe that every human life is sacred, that its sanctity is imposed to every human being by God. There is no sentence that could be imposed on Fisher that could bring Gene back to me." After Fisher was sent to prison for Gene's murder, police collected blood and hair samples from him. They found a picture of Fisher with Carrie Wilkerson when they searched his home in February of 1984. The samples didn't link him to Carrie's death, and he denied killing her, so he was not charged with the crime. In June 2010, investigators had received a call about possible new information in Carrie Wilkerson's case. While the information did not lead to a new suspect, it prompted the State Bureau of Investigation in Carrboro to take another look at her case. It was then they discovered DNA evidence from a bedspread kept in a rape kit at the Carrboro Police Department that finally conclusively linked Fisher to Carrie's rape and murder. Looking back, they discovered that Fisher had been employed by a construction company that worked on the Dean Smith Center at the UNC campus. He had not been at work both mornings Carrie Wilkerson and Gene Fewel were murdered. When confronted with the evidence, Fisher agreed to plead guilty to the first-degree murder and rape of Carrie Wilkerson, along with first-degree arson. Superior Court Judge Carl Fox gave Fisher 2 additional life sentences, plus another 15 years for an arson charge, all to run one after another. He would have been eligible for parole the following month, if not for the new convictions related to Carrie Wilkerson's murder. Carrie's stepmother, Norma Shivers, said she had long suspected Fisher was involved in Carrie's murder. "We knew who it was," she told local media outlets. "They just didn't have the evidence. I've known it all along." Carrboro Police Captain J.G. Booker confirmed the use of new DNA identification technology at the time proved to be the break officers had long been looking for in the case. He added, "You may have a strong suspicion, but without evidence, you can't prove it in court. You have that glimmer of hope that something will break." He also told the public that while there was a lot of focus on Fisher as the perpetrator, it was important to remember that a young girl's life was taken away from her before she ever got a chance to live it. George Richard Fisher remains incarcerated at Morey Correctional Institution in Hookerton, North Carolina. On November 5th, 2018, the community of Lumberton was shaken when a teenage girl was abducted in broad daylight in front of her home. I first discussed Hania Aguilar's murder in episode 63. Like many junior high students on a weekday, Hania Aguilar was waiting to get a ride to school from her family. According to news station KSRO, the Lumberton Junior High School student had started her aunt's green SUV to warm it up, eager to get to school. She had started the 8th grade that August and loved science. As the car sat idling, she waited outside of her home on the 3000 block of Elizabethtown Road in Rosewood Mobile Home Park. She was wearing blue jeans and a flowered shirt. According to an article that ran in the Herald Sun, at the same time not too far away, a man in black clothing was spotted walking past her neighbors' mobile homes. One woman felt so frightened as he went by, she pretended to talk on her phone. 2 other neighbors reported seeing a stranger wearing a mask, coming onto their porch and trying to break in. Then, just before 7 a.m., a witness heard Hania scream and saw a man wearing black clothes and a yellow bandana force her into the idling car. He drove away with her inside. The car was a 2002 Ford Expedition with a South Carolina license plate number. It was recognizable because it had paint peeling from the hood and a Clemson University sticker on the back window. At 10 a.m., an Amber Alert was issued for the missing teen. A news article in the April 28, 2019 edition of the Herald Sun reported that when her friends at school initially heard of her going missing, they were certain she was okay, that she'd find her way back home. 3 days later, on November 8th, just before 8 a.m., the stolen SUV was found on Quincy Avenue in Lumberton. According to the FBI, a witness said they saw the vehicle backed into the woods. Hania never made it home, but she wasn't located until 22 days later. On November 27th, about a week after Thanksgiving, she was found in a swampy area 10 miles from home, submerged in a muddy pit under a plastic folding table. She had been sexually assaulted. While the autopsy report doesn't list a cause of death, it was likely that she was strangled. The FBI and Lumberton Police Department's investigation led to the arrest of Michael Ray McClellan, now 38. ABC 15, a local South Carolina station, obtained documents that provided details that led to his arrest. 2 people indicated that Michael McClellan arrived at their home in the Deerfield Mobile Home Park between 9:30 a.m. and 10 a.m., about 2.5 hours before her kidnapping. At the time, he was still wearing the dark clothing, black hoodie, yellow bandana, and yellow-colored bag. When at the home, McClellan asked the 2 people if he could wash his clothing. They indicated he was all wet and had a cup of loose change. The owner of the stolen SUV reported that a cup of loose change had been missing from the car. McClellan was also trying to sell 2 video monitors. The SUV was missing 2 video monitors. ABC 15 shared another witness report of someone who knew McClellan. They had spoken with him before the kidnapping on November 5, 2018. He said he had been planning to do some licks, which is a slang term for robbery. He planned on targeting several mobile home parks in the area, knowing he had to be careful because of cameras in the park. Another witness told authorities that McClellan wore a yellow-colored bandana to cover his face, and so people would think he was a Latin king, a Hispanic gang member. In December of 2018, nearly 1,000 people attended Hania's funeral. Her friends at school held their own memorial service as well and read letters out loud. Her gravestone, decorated with beautiful purple flowers, her favorite color, shows a picture of Hania's smiling face with the words in Spanish, Vuela alto, hermoso angel, which translate to fly high, beautiful angel. What makes this case even more heartbreaking was that it likely could have been prevented. In 2017, more than a year before Hania's abduction and murder, the Robeson County Sheriff's Office received evidence that connected McClellan's DNA to a 2016 rape case when he crawled through a window and assaulted a woman at knife point. His DNA had already been in the system due to an earlier conviction. Although the results were sent to the district attorney's office, it fell through the cracks. Robeson County District Attorney Johnson Britt told the News and Observer this. It wasn't until McClellan's DNA was found on the SUV linked to Anya's kidnapping did the police connect the case. There's more. The police in nearby Fairmont County had a warrant for McClellan's arrest for robbery and kidnapping and a carjacking gone wrong. That warrant went unserved until November 13th, 8 days after Anya disappeared. On October 17, 2018, the state's Post-Release Supervision and Parole Commission issued a second warrant for McClellan's arrest because he had violated the terms of his recent release from prison. Nothing happened until November 13, 2018. According to an article on news affiliate ABC 15, while two of the investigators lost their jobs following an internal investigation, the family has no peace. In his first court appearance in December of 2018, Michael McClellan appeared wearing a bulletproof vest. He was charged with 10 felonies, including first-degree murder, first-degree rape, and first-degree kidnapping. His attorney cited having a very limited contact with his client following the pandemic and facing the withdrawal of another one of McClellan's attorneys as repeated delays occurred in the process. But in November of 2024, Michael Ray McClellan pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in the death of Hania Aguilar and the attacks on two other victims from October 2016 and July 2018. A judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He tried to escape from prison guards both before and after his hearing, but fortunately for the community, was not successful. In episode 29, I discussed the cold case of a 5-year-old girl from Hope County. Brittany Locklear was 5 years old on January 7, 1998, when she walked out of her house to wait for the school bus with her mother, Connie Locklear Chavez. It was still dark out, and at one point, Connie had to go back into the house briefly to use the restroom. When she came back out, Brittany was gone. Connie went to West Hoke Elementary to see if Brittany had made it to school on the bus, but she hadn't. When police began investigating, neighbors told them they had seen a pickup truck pull erratically into the driveway of the home, where a white male got out of the driver's side and quickly picked up Brittany and put her in the car. Brittany, who was so tiny many thought she was closer to 3 years old rather than 5, didn't appear to resist the man, so they didn't think anything was wrong at the time. Just 1 day later, Brittany's body was found in a drainage ditch about 3 miles away from her home. Her clothes had been removed. She had been sexually assaulted and drowned. Her backpack, clothing, and shoes were discovered about 2 miles away later that day. Community members have never forgotten the precocious Lumbee child or the cruel way she was murdered. In 2003, authorities announced they had identified a suspect who had been a member of the Fort Bragg Fire Department, but the DNA evidence collected from him turned out not to be a match to crime scene evidence. The Hope County Sheriff's Office says the investigation into Brittany's abduction and murder is still ongoing, and they are determined to solve it. There is a reward being offered in this case. Anyone with information regarding the murder of Brittany Locklear is asked to call the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation at 1-800-334-3000. Before we continue, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. I had been unhappy with my old podcast host for a while and was looking for other options. I discovered Riverside FM and learned that for one low monthly fee, it would help me record the podcast and utilize video capabilities. It uses AI technology to easily create clips from each episode that I can then share on my social media accounts. I don't consider myself to be very tech savvy, but audio and video editing with Riverside FM software has been a breeze, and I look forward to recording days now. If you are looking for a company that will help you with all your podcasting, webinar, and video needs, I encourage you to check out Riverside FM. You won't be disappointed. I'll include a link for you in the show notes. Are you looking to level up your writing or learn a new skill? Whether you focus on nonfiction or are more inclined to creative writing, or want to learn how to put together a digital portfolio of your writing, Wow Women on Writing can help. Interested in podcasting? Check out a digital course I created called You Can Start a Podcast. During this pre-recorded webinar, you will learn the benefits of creating your own podcast, materials you need to get started, how to develop content that will keep listeners coming back for more, and ways your podcast can create supplemental income. I'll share examples of different types of podcasts, how to decide on a format, ways to handle the technology necessary for creating a podcast, how to develop your first few episodes, promotion and monetization ideas, and ways you can repurpose your podcast content. I'll provide all the written materials and resources you need, and give you a handout with information discussed in the webinar, along with suggestions for a few different types of podcasts to explore. Best of all, this webinar only costs $30. You can find it by going to wow-womenonwriting.com and clicking on the Classroom tab. I'll also post a link in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show. I'd like to segue into haunted tales from schools and universities located in the Carolinas now. These first appeared in episode 16, Ghostly Tales from the Carolinas. The first one takes place at a high school that was a sports rival of my own high school in Buncombe County. Clyde A. Irwin High is located in Asheville, which, as many of you already know, seems to be a hotbed of supernatural activity. Here's the backstory on this high school and why many think it is home to multiple spirits. Back in 1973, the Buncombe County Board of Education decided they wanted to upgrade and build a new campus for the high school. The problem was, the board also requested that a centuries-old potter's field, holding the graves of poor and homeless and elderly residents of the county, be moved to make room for the new building. I found an article from 2002 that ran in the Mountain Express, the town's alternative weekly newspaper. They did an extensive story on the supernatural occurrences that have taken place at the school. An unnamed retired assistant principal had this to say about the moving of the graves. My first thought was that they didn't need to move the graveyard in the first place. None of the school is directly built on it. The cemetery was between the fence of the football field and down into the bank right above the third floor of the school. In my opinion, they could have built the school in there and never had to move any of the graveyard. The board hired an independent contractor who was in the business of traveling around the country removing cemeteries at the request of various development projects. The remains were reinterred on a hillside behind West Buncombe Elementary School, just across Lees Creek Road from the high school, under military-style rows of identical white crosses. The article said, most of the graves, however, were unmarked, including those containing victims of a tuberculosis epidemic. Some coffins were marked by tombstones because the cemetery had been used by local families before the county took it over. Records from the Pack Memorial Library indicate the cemetery was founded in the late 1800s by the Rhodes family. It is now known as the County Home Cemetery. The contractors searched for the unmarked grave sites by plunging a T-handled rod into the ground and feeling for soft spots. As the number of graves they excavated rose from their initial estimate of only 200 to at least 1,000, the gruesome toil aroused morbid curiosity. While most of the human remains were moved, one count puts it at 613 people, another at 604, hundreds were not moved and remained underground on the Irwin High School property near the football field and stadium concession stand. Over the years, there have been numerous reports of strange incidences around the school, and a lot of the reports come from members of the custodial staff who are there after hours. The elevator in the school goes up and down by itself all the time. Another former teacher had this to say. There have been 2 occasions that I know of where there have been pictures hanging on the wall that, for no reason at all, just fell off. And fell off in such a way that they didn't fall straight down, but they fell out and away from the wall, the former employee explained. There again, you could always explain that maybe somebody was doing something on the other side of the wall that maybe forced them off. But another employee said, I've seen the VCR eject a videotape that had been in all day long and had not been played, and the VCR just without any warning automatically popped the tape out. To me, this sounds like something straight out of that 1980s movie Poltergeist. In this case, though, the spirits seem to be more into playful pranks, like riding on elevators, knocking pictures off walls, moving trash cans, and slamming doors when no one is supposed to be in the building. Maybe the spirits are well aware that the students and administrators had nothing to do with disturbing the graves in the Potter's Field and are content to make themselves known in harmless ways. The University of South Carolina in Columbia also has its share of ghostly spirits. One seems like he is simply choosing to keep watch over a university he loved with all his heart. Founded all the way back in 1801, the the University of South Carolina is one of the oldest public universities in the United States. A man named James Ryan McKissick was one of the most beloved presidents of the college, and he helped guide USC through the Great Depression and World War II. With the help of President Roosevelt's New Deal, McKissick expanded campus by adding a new library as well as 5 dormitories for incoming students. He was serving as president when he died suddenly and unexpectedly of a heart attack in September of 1944. Students petitioned for his body to be buried in an area of the campus known as the Historic Horseshoe. His grave is located just a few feet from the campus library, and there are reports that the ghost of McKissick wanders around the building at night, turning on lights and going through the books. At Queen's University, located in Charlotte, employees and administrators shared tales of the various ghostly spirits that inhabit different buildings on the campus in a Charlotte Haunts article that ran in Charlotte Magazine in 2020. Probably the most famous spirit at Queen's University is the one of a young girl named Clara, who apparently hung herself from the banister of a back stairwell in a building called Morrison Hall, which now serves as the Office for Residents' Life and Housing. Stories about why Clara took her life vary, but it appears to have happened around the end of World War II. The story made such an impression on the university that they erected a ceiling-to-floor panel of wooden slats that block access to the banister, just to be safe. Students and administrators report hearing noises coming from the unoccupied room where Clara resided, laptops mysteriously turning off and on in the room during meetings, a chair squeaking with no one in the room, and so on. When a WFAE reporter visited the campus back in 2019, he picked up knocks and sounds in the stairwell that had no explanation. At the time of his visit, another employee thought she heard a young woman crying in the stairwell, but when she went down the hall to investigate, could find no one there. Queen's University is also home to the spirit of a young woman named Suzanne Little in the building named after her, the Suzanne Little Recital Hall. Her husband, E.H. Little, was a well-known industrialist and philanthropist who donated the money in order for the building to be named after his wife, who loved music. Over the years, students and staff at Queen's claimed to hear the faint sounds of piano playing music in the basement halls near the recital space. Dana Auditorium at Guilford College is named for Charles Dana, a philanthropist who donated a good chunk of money toward the completion of the building in the 1900s. But the site of the auditorium contains a history that lends itself to potential hauntings. The Battle of Guilford Courthouse was a Revolutionary War battle fought on March 15, 1781. The battle resulted in a British victory, and many soldiers from both sides were wounded and killed. The area was used as a field hospital for the wounded and dying. There's also a cemetery directly across the street from the campus that has graves dating back to 18th century, including a mass grave of both British and American soldiers from the American Revolution. According to school records, shortly after the auditorium was completed in 1961, strange happenings began to take place. Some believe the spirit of a wounded soldier who died at the field hospital explores the building. There have also been tales of a young girl spotted in the choir room and a man in a brown suit. Others walking by the auditorium at night have heard the faint sounds of a piano playing from within when no one was supposed to be in the building. This brings us to the conclusion of this episode of Missing in the Carolinas. If you enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and give it a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, so please like our pages and get started on a discussion of the missing people profiled on the show. Do you know of a missing persons case or true crime in North or South Carolina that you think should be covered? Email me at missinginthecarolinas@gmail.com with any details you can share. Cover art for this podcast was designed by Macintosh Multimedia. All episodes are researched and written by me, Renee Robertson, with sound editing provided by Daniel Robertson. Thanks so much for listening.